What's a really fucked up thing you've witnessed as a kid but didn't realize it was until you were older? When I was a kid, all the kids would sleep in the basement on Christmas Eve to give space for Santa to drop off the presents. That night there was a lot of noise coming from outside on the street, but we couldn't see anything because there was snow covering the egress windows. My mom came downstairs and told us to stay there. But soon we heard sirens and saw police lights reflecting in the snow. There was a lot of commotion that we couldn't see. Then my dad came downstairs with a very real Santa Claus. He told us that his sleigh crashed in the snow and that the kind police officers were helping him get unstuck, and while they were working he was visiting the kids in the neighborhood. He pulled out a present for each of us and sat with my family while we opened them and sang a few Christmas songs. When things calmed down outside, he went back to delivering toys. Years later I learned that there was a large gang fight outside of our house and that a few people died right outside. An older man from our church lived down the road, and knowing my parents had undoubtedly scared children at home, put on his Santa suit and came over once the police arrived. Santa was a hero to me as a child, but that man is a hero to me now. Man's a legend. An actual saint for sure. My mom had to work when I was little and my older sisters were in school. I was locked in the bathroom during the day until my sisters came home from school and let me out. Sometimes they wouldn't let me out, so they didn't have to watch me. They were 7 and 9 years older than me, and I was somewhat afraid of them because they were not very nice to me, so I would often stay in the bathroom or hide in the hamper. It does explain why I'm perfectly okay to be alone. This one bothers me the most of what I've read so far. They basically treated you like a dog and locked you in a kennel. This is the kind of thing you see on 2020. Hope you have gotten away from that all. As a matter of fact, this kind of thing literally was just an episode of 2020, aired last week or maybe the week before. About the Turpin family. 2 of the Turpin daughters did an interview. Super heart-wrenching stuff. Here's a link to the first part of that episode. My mom used to sleep with dudes while I was in the same bed as her. Never really clicked till I got older. Let's say my therapist isn't a fan of my mother at all. Edit to everyone replying with a similar situation. If you haven't sought out therapy, please do if it bothers you. It is not your fault, you did not do anything wrong, and you do matter. I know how it can make it feel like all of that is untrue though. Reach out if you need someone to talk to. When I was around 11, a younger boy, maybe 6 or 7, on the school bus told me how he shared a bed with his mom. He said sometimes her boyfriend would come over and he would have to cover himself with a blanket while the mom and boyfriend wrestled in bed. I didn't have the heart to tell him. He probably realized what it was later on. I hope he gets therapy for that. I hope everyone in this thread gets therapy. My uncle on the farm took his really old dog for a walk in the woods when I was about 7. He came back without him, and when I cried asking where he was, my mom told me he must gotten lost. So every weekend for the rest of that summer I would put food and a blanket at the edge of the woods and sit and call his name. I was convinced he was finding his way to the food because it was being eaten, but he was too scared of getting in trouble for getting lost, so he was hiding in there. So this is what happens to them when they already live on a farm. Farm kids are told the dog's gone to live in a big city to follow his dreams of being a therapy dog at a fashion magazine. Lived in a townhouse. In my bedroom at night I would hear the kids next door scream and cry. My parents called the police once, but the man claimed he was playing with his kids and didn't let them in. Apparently the police couldn't do anything. Found out when I was older that the man had later tried to kill the whole family, kids, baby included, with a pair of scissors. I remember when I was about 11 or 12 our neighbors were a family of 5 kids. They were terrible. I was afraid of the dad who would curse and scream at his kids and the neighbor kids including my sister and I. He was an awful person. He would beat the hell out of those kids. He would take them into his bedroom, which was right across from my window, and I could hear everything. They would scream and cry. I can still hear it to this day. The next day the kids would be black and blue. I begged my parents to call the police, but they wouldn't. They weren't the greatest parents either. I have no idea how I was brave enough, but I anonymously called Child Protective Services, and I remember they came out the next day and interviewed the kids. Nothing ever happened, but the parents went around the neighborhood telling everyone they got a lawyer and they were going to sue whoever reported the false allegations. Horrible people. I came home from junior high one day to see my dad in the backyard. He was digging a bunch of holes. He told me to stay back because there was a gas leak. I didn't think much of it. Many years later, when I was in my late 20s, My stepmother told me that my dad got really drunk the night before and beat her pretty badly. Her blood got on the sheets and walls. In the middle of the night, she left to go to her mom's house. When my dad finally woke up, he was convinced he had killed her and buried her in the backyard. So I came upon him trying to find her body. Needless to say, I'm not a fan of that guy. I had a cousin that committed suicide by jumping into a quarry. I was 12. My mom and I went to the wake, and when we got to the body, the casket was closed from the chest down. But it was glaringly obvious that he had been at least partially decapitated, because his head was just kind of awkwardly shoved on. They tried their best, but apparently you can't make that look natural. So, years later as an adult, I started wondering why in the world my mom would let me see that. So I asked her. It turned out to actually be a thing that no one in the family spoke about openly. My mom didn't know he would look like that, and neither did anyone else. After my cousin died, he was transported to a funeral home. My aunt insisted on an open casket, which the funeral home refused. It somehow escalated to the point that my aunt hired another funeral home on the condition they have a viewing. No one except my aunt knew any of this until after the wake. So people start showing up, view the body, and see that he doesn't have a neck and was decapitated. And it isn't like you can go around and say FYI, the dead guy is all jacked up from jumping into a quarry and you really shouldn't look. Edit, for those asking, it was a rock quarry. He pulled off to the side of the highway, parked his car, and jumped. Here is the quarry, you can see the highway in the background of the photo on that page. This was 30 years ago. I came to a personal decision a couple of years ago to never look at a body at a funeral ever again. I have too many family member and friends where I have a view of their waxy and unnatural corpse in my mental photo album of them alive, and I don't want that. I will keep my memories and last memories of them without spiking the set with a death mask. I am with you on this. It's not something I want to remember them as. In my country, open caskets are not the norm, but families can go see the body in the funeral home before the funeral. When my granddad died suddenly, I was 12, my granddad and aunt went to see his body. My other aunt stayed home and told me she didn't want that to be her last memory of him. She'd rather remember him sitting at his table eating his chicken sandwich, which is when she had last seen him the day he died. May we all get one last chicken sandwich before the end. As a kid we had a young family in the neighborhood. Dad was about 30 and he would always play baseball, wiffle ball, with the neighborhood kids. For some reason anytime the ball went into his bushes he would freak out like stop, oh get it. I found out years later after he died, he was an alcoholic and was hiding it from his family. He died of cirrhosis and I found out he hid his bottles of vodka in the bushes. Really sad to think of now, because despite his illness addiction, he was such a good influence on the kids in the neighborhood. Always taught us to respect elders and work hard at things if we want to become great. He was a great guy. Very sad to think about now. Edit, substituted illness addiction for issues. Edit, removed raging because may I have used wrong. I meant he drank a lot since it was enough to ruin his liver. THX for correction. Staying up waking my dad when he would stop breathing. Later realizing he was overdosing on opiates. My mom would always fall asleep on the sofa and it would take me a long time to wake her up, it was like she was half dead. She always would wake up and tell me she was just resting her eyes. It wasn't until I was older that I realized she was taking opiates my entire childhood. I thought sleeping in the afternoon was a normal adult thing to do. Edit, I should add, sleeping as in falling face first into the floor, or dropping a cup of tea, or having a half-eaten sandwich in her hand, etc. You get the point. My mom would actively drink and drive with me in the car. I was a pretty naive kid, so I didn't think anything of it when my mom would fill a Dixie cup with wine and put it in the cup holder. It was so normalized to me growing up that it wasn't until I had my own kid that I realized how ducked up this was. Edit, holy shirt, now I know what people mean when they say rip my inbox. I am in awe at how common this is, back when the elder millennials were children. Like I mentioned in a reply, how messed up can a person be that they can't wait 20 to 30 minutes to get a drink at their destination? Times have changed too. Back in the 60s drinking and driving was practically a sport. I don't think we, as a whole, realized how crazy that is like we do now. My grandparents would leave my mom and uncles in the car while they were in the bar. All the kids there would hang out in the cars while the adults got loaded. Lol, in the 1970s and 80s I would get toted around to bingo halls multiple nights a week. Stuffed under a table with coloring books or toys for several hours, while everyone was smoking like chimneys. Bowling alleys for me.